All right, let me just see whether or not you guys can hear me okay. Am I coming through? Awesome. That's good. Great. All right, so just something to note before we get into it. So this upcoming week, not this week, but next week on Monday, there is no class, right? Because you guys are off for, for Family Day. So there's no class on Family Day because I will be off as well. However, I do think it still gets delivered. I just have to record it and then give it to you guys that way. I think that's the way it goes. Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the way it goes. I'm not sure when your reading week is because that is the reading week for the Lakehead students. I think yours might be the following week. Let me just check real fast. Let's see here. Important college dates. So if you just type important dates, Georgian College, then usually it helps you find what you're looking for. Let's see here. Oh, it's not till March. I thought it was earlier than that. Yeah, March 8th. Is that right? Yeah, March 8th. Yeah, Marco says it's March 8th as well. So it's not for a little while. So yeah, so the 15th is Family Day. I mean, then we've got the 16th, the 19th, the 26th, whatever those days, right? But anyways, the following week, we will be having class. So let's see. This week, so next week's will be recorded and only provided via YouTube. I believe that's how that goes. Hold on, let me open up my email, because I did get an email from one of the actual people telling me how that goes. I think it was by Kim. Hold on one second. I just want to make sure I give you the right information because I'm not totally 100% sure how that goes. Okay, for assistance, statutory holidays are May 18th, July 1st. That's not this. That was in May. You know what? I'll look it up and I'll get back to you guys. Yeah, I'll look it up and I'll get back to you. But I'm pretty sure it's recorded, and then I just deliver it recorded, and you guys consume it recorded. And if you have any questions, you just reach out on Slack. So that's probably the way that we'll do it. I'm not sure what our next lesson is, actually, because we have kind of gone out of order. I was going to do error handling and unit testing, but then I was like, based on some of the questions that I've gotten, I think that might be a little bit out of reach for us, at least at this particular stage. So let's just see what we're up to next. So our next thing will be data validation, sanitization, and normalization. Right. Then there's a midterm in week 7, and then you have reading week. So this week here, the updating and deleting data we're doing right now, this is the one that's being, where is it? This is the one that I replaced with this one. So I guess we'll be doing parent-child relationships is likely what we'll do, which makes sense actually because some of these other ones go a little bit longer. So I'll do parent-child relationships in week 6, and then we'll have our midterm, and our midterm will cover those 6 weeks of stuff. Okay, but yeah, that's not for 3 weeks, so not too bad. All right, let's talk about what we did last week. So last week, we started talking about relational databases and how they apply to working in PHP. You guys have had, now I'm assuming, 3 relational database classes at this point. You should be on your 4th, right? So I think most of you have it tomorrow or something. So you should have your 4th one coming, right? It sounds like somebody is giving feedback. Dan, you want to mute your mic? Or I'll just mute you. Yeah, so relational databases, you guys will be on your 4th one. So we talked about why we need a database. You know, the browsers are stateless. Obviously, if we want to keep state, we need to save that somewhere, right? So maybe somebody has a configuration for how they want to view their experience, right? Or maybe you want to provide a customized experience with their name, and all that information needs to be stored somewhere. So where do we store it? Well, the easiest way to store it is in a database, right? The database provides us a point of being able to store state not only for a short time, but permanently, right? So, and the cool thing about that too is we can actually connect other applications to that data and feed those other applications with that data. Not necessarily just one PHP app, but like a mobile phone, maybe a desktop publishing system, anything. Really anything we want to connect that data to. So we created an example database. I think we called it countries. Then we just quickly connected MySQL to that database and got all that working. And then, what else did we do? We inserted a new row into MySQL using PHP, which was pretty straightforward. And then we displayed the rows in a table. Now, I had you guys do a lab, right? And most of you seem to have no real problem with the lab. A few of you reached out saying you were having some difficulties with MySQL not working for you. And based on the information that you had provided me, I directed you to the IT department because it was a further problem with your computer and nothing that I was going to be able to assist you with, especially remotely. So hopefully those of you that were having issues, you were able to get support from IT. If you haven't, then you definitely need to reach out because it's just MySQL every week from this point forward. That's the one difficult part about this class with the Relational Database class, because you're installing so many different things. Plus, I think you guys have ASP.NET this semester too. Or you have another programming class this semester, I think. Anyways, the problem is you have so many things that you're installing. Sometimes servers conflict with other servers. They're sharing ports, or they're attempting to share ports, or you have DLL files that are in there that need to be cleared out, or stuff like that. And it's just beyond the capabilities of us to be able to support all of that because everybody's issue is different. So the IT are able to hit the ground running a little bit more efficiently than I can. So hopefully you were able to get your issues resolved. So, what are we doing tonight? Well, tonight, we are going to learn about updating and deleting data. So, hopefully you'll enjoy this. So, this is the next two pieces of our puzzle. So, last week we did creating and reading. So, we created a record and we read a record into a table. We're going to continue with that same code that we created last week. We'll just copy and paste it into another folder, and then we'll start from there, and we'll add in updating and deleting, and then at the end of all this, we have lab 2. So that's 2 of 5 that we'll knock out of the park this week. So yeah, then we're going to take a look at how to create a form, how to update a row, and how to delete a row. And then if we have time, we're going to also do some notifications. We're going to create a small notification system to be able to properly notify the user when they have created a record or have deleted a record or all that fun stuff. Okie dokie. So let's, why not? Let's get started. So our first step, obviously, is to boot up Wamp. So let's press our start menu, open up Wamp or XAMPP or whatever it is that you're using. And we'll let that guy boot up. And hopefully it goes green for everybody. There we are. Now if we open up our browser window, hold on, we should be able to access localhost. And if you can access localhost, PHP is working. Otherwise it wouldn't work. Next thing we need to do is open up our actual code. So the easiest way to get to it is by clicking on the WAMP symbol and navigating to your www directory. So I just left click on the green thing and then do www, and it takes me right there. I'm going to go into my Comp 1006 folder, and in there I have a lesson 3 folder. That's the lesson 3 that we were working on last week. I'm going to copy that by hitting Control C, or you can right click and choose to copy. Then I'm going to paste, and it should create a copy of the lesson for you. And I'm just going to change this to 4, and we're going to start from there. No, there's no quiz 2 either. I think there was supposed to be, but I didn't get around to writing it, so I will write that this week and I'll deliver it next week. So there's no quiz 2, just a lab. Quiz 3, I don't think we're that far behind in quizzes, are we? I mean, sometimes I tend to get behind on some of those gradables. I have them all, I just don't like overloading people. I don't want that, I want the syllabus. Let's see here. So there's only 4 quizzes, and there's only 2 in this semester. And actually, no, there's no lit quiz 2 till next week. So, yeah. So you're good. All right, once you've created a Lesson 4 folder, go into the Lesson 4 folder, and obviously it will contain all of your files. Right-click and choose to open with code. Or just open it in the code editor that you're working with. I don't think we need this to be quite this big. So I'm going to move this over a little bit and collapse it and make my code editor quite a bit bigger. Tell me when the Lab 2 will be due, because on Blackboard is due by February 15th. That is correct. It will be due February 15th by midnight. Goggin deep. Turn your caps lock off, by the way. All right. So we have learned how to create, and we have learned how to read. So we should probably test our application and make sure everything is still working. I'm pretty sure it was working when we left last week. So we're going to navigate to the Comp 1006 folder, Lesson 04, because that's where we built our application, and hit Enter. And it should take us here. Not very stylish. Doesn't look great. Right? I mean, why don't we take a few seconds and add in something that will make it look considerably nicer? For really the tiny bit of time it's going to take us, it definitely makes sense. We need the Bootstrap Cdn. Have you guys used Bootstrap before? You guys had experience with Bootstrap? No? Bootstrap's pretty cool. So we are going to add this code that I'm pasting into our chat channel here, into our index, not there. Hold on, where's our header? Oh, I guess it's at the top of every page, isn't it? Yeah, that's kind of annoying. Let's go into our form PHP, because that's where this page is. And up here in the head of our form PHP, we're going to paste that little chunk of code that I just gave you. And then we're going to refresh, and you'll see that the font automatically improves quite a bit. All right. So once we have that in there, we can actually kind of fix this up a little bit because it's kind of goofy looking. So right now we have this great big form. We can use the code folding, which is this little arrow that you see here, to fold up the code. So the form is kind of folded. It hasn't disappeared, it's just folded. And then we're going to add a div with a class equal to container. Gerline, if you're getting undefined index, it's likely because you're missing some of the code. You shouldn't be getting undefined index. Even if the things are missing, you shouldn't be getting undefined index. You're probably missing some of the code. Give me 1 second. Let me add in this div, and then I will give you some code. I think that's probably the case for some people. They are missing some code pieces. Let me right click, choose to send to a compressed file. We'll go into Blackboard, and I will put it under the Lesson 4 folder. Last week's code is what I'll call it. Oh, right, that's in that weird directory. There we go. There you are. Just go ahead and download that Gerline, and then you can put those files into that directory, and you should be fine. If you're still having undefined index, then it might have something else to do with MySQL. Yeah. Hijack, if you could send me an email letting me know about that, I will happy to help you outside of class. Okay? Not right now. So just send me an email and then I can help you. Alright, so this is going to add this div. This div is going to do some very magical stuff, all because of this class that I've added here. So what Bootstrap is it's called a CSS framework. Essentially, it gives you a whole bunch of stuff that you can use without having to write a ton of CSS. Its purpose is for programmers like us. Maybe some of you are able to do good design. I'm not. But so I want to prototype things that are not terribly gross looking. Bootstrap allows me to do that simply. So as you can see this whole thing is just kind of moved over to the side here, and it's nicely centered now, which looks a lot better than it did before. Of course, my table doesn't look very good, but we can clean that up too. So the div class container, that's exactly what it's doing. It's just shoving everything over to the right. So if I go into my table, I can do some cool things with it as well. I can add in some classes into the table to help improve what's happening. So the class should be available, Bootstrap should be available because we're importing everything into the same file anyways. So I'm going to add class equals table and then table dash striped onto the actual table. And if I refresh, look at how nice my table looks. And I mean, why not add some margin as well? my-5 will push the table down a bit. I'll give you this class for the table. And we can even clean up our form. Bootstrap has tons of form elements that we can use to make our forms look a lot prettier than they are. This form right now is pretty godly looking, but we can make it look considerably better. Are you guys still with me? Is anybody behind and still typing? Every time you refresh the browser, you get a new entry? Did you submit something? Oh, you haven't submitted anything, but it just keeps creating a brand new entry? Oh, okay. Maybe download the code that I put up onto Blackboard then and run that code instead, Marcos. Yeah. All right, in the form, we're just going to update our form a little bit. Right now, our form is pretty basic. It doesn't look very pretty. We created all these divs, and I kind of did that with this intention in mind to modify them slightly. So we're going to add a new class to this called form group to the div. And we're going to copy that, and we're going to put it on all three divs. So, and you'll notice that these divs wrap the label and the input, so we're putting them on those divs. If I refresh, not very much happens except for the spacing kind of improves. And then on the inputs, I'm going to add a class there and put in form control. And we can do that on the text area. We can do it on any type of input, even select boxes. And all this is doing is adding some nice styling. That's it. Nothing too complex. See? And now our form looks considerably better. And don't worry, we're going to give the button some love as well. The button, we can make it look a lot nicer than that. We can give it a class of button-primary, and then that creates a nice little blue button for us. See how much better our whole page looks with just very minor changes. It's really cool. Bootstrap's awesome because you can prototype something super, super fast. But once you start working with Bootstrap, you kind of start seeing it out on the internet a lot. And you're like, yep, that's Bootstrap. Oh, that's Bootstrap. It stands out quite a bit. Now, it is kind of weird that the table's spread out like that, but we might clean up our files later. I don't want to get too much into cleaning up files because that gets into a little bit of... it gets tricky. It just gets tricky. That's all. I don't think we have any other types of files that we need to work with here. Form and table, that's basically it. We're pretty good there. So we're going to update our table with some new actions, but it does require us to talk about something, and that is query strings. Hopefully you guys remember what query strings are. We talked about it a couple weeks ago. Query strings are these wonderful things that you see here, right? This is a query string. So it starts off with our domain and our path, right? So we have example.com, and then there's a question mark, and the question mark signifies a query string. Query strings are done by key and value pairs. So name equals Sean 20% McKinnon. That is name is the key. And then the Sean McKinnon part is the value. The 20% is a code that the browser adds in automatically to replace spaces. If I want to add a second parameter, I just need to include the ampersand symbol, and then I can add in my key and the next value. If I want to add in a third one, again, just another ampersand symbol, and then a key and a value. That's it. So, like I told you before, we don't use these incredibly often, but we do use them, and especially when we start working with editing and deleting data. And the reason why we use them when we're doing editing and deleting, because it's an easy way to tell the browser that we want to edit this specific record. Editing, the whole idea of editing a record in our database means that we have to be able to tell the database which record we want to edit, because it doesn't know, right? If we just say, hey, go update this, it's going to be like, okay, well, what do you want me to update? Which row do you want me to update? How do you want me to update it, right? It needs to know that information. So we need to be able to provide that information to our processing script, and the only way we can do that is by providing some sort of identifier, right? And I was kind of shocked last week when you guys told me you hadn't used IDs in databases yet. That was kind of weird, but now you know how. Now you know what an ID does and its purpose. The purpose of the ID is to create a unique identifier on the row. And then we can use that unique identifier to retrieve that record and update it, because we can guarantee that the record we're retrieving is unique, okay? When we actually do our table here, and we're iterating over all of our rows, we don't just have name, description, and population. We are fetching everything from countries, all, that's what that star means, all of the columns within our database. So that also includes the ID, which means we could quite easily create a link using that ID in order to get to our edit page and then pass that ID to our edit page so that it populates with the information that we're looking for. So I think doing is easier than talking. So let's leave your new country thing open for now. We're going to add a new field into this table here called action. So what I'm going to do is in my table.php page, I'm going to add another TD tag here, like so, and I'm going to call it actions with an S. So as you can see, I get a new column called actions. Now last week we created this little PHP block here, and I did mention there is a way to make this much cleaner where we don't have to use these curly braces, because these curly braces kind of look a little gross. This is a huge amount of PHP when most of this is technically HTML tags. Wouldn't it be nicer if we could write this in a way so that we wouldn't have to see all of this like strings? So we didn't have to use strings, because strings are gross, right? We don't want to use strings. So we're going to fix this. What I would like you to do is, first of all, delete it. That's step one. Step 2 is to bring this question mark, the closing tag for the PHP tag, up to the line where the opening tag is. Then you're going to write the for each loop just like you did before, only the for each loop looks a little bit different. $row as, no, sorry, $rows as $row. That's what I want. And this needs to be up there. So notice this colon. What this colon means is that what precedes needs to respect what this command is doing. So the colon also means that we have to close it. So the way we close it is we write another PHP statement down here, and we just add end in front of the command that we want to close. So if this was an if condition, we would write end if. If this is a for each loop, then we write end for each. If this was a for loop, we would write end for. Stuff like that. Now inside here, we can go ahead and rewrite our tr tag and our td tags, but as proper HTML. So we want to spit out the name here, so we'll use our shorthand echo statement, right? So $row name. Write the next td tag, and again, a shorthand echo statement. $row description. $row population. And if we refresh, nothing looks different. And that's because nothing's really changed. We've just changed the way we're actually writing it. PHP, by its first nature, is a templating language. It's meant to be entwined with the HTML so that we can properly use HTML and PHP back and forth. It basically gives our HTML programming power, the ability to do loops, the ability to create templates and stuff like that. That's the whole power of it. So by learning how to write these shorthand statements, it gives us more power in being able to keep our HTML and our PHP separated. So I will copy this and paste it for you. There you go. So we added this extra column actions, and right now it's not being picked up, right? We have got the name up here, but we don't actually have the highlights here. So we want to add our actions in, but our actions are going to be two links that we're going to create. So we'll create the TD tag, but we'll space it apart. And we're going to write our links in here. So you guys all know how to make an anchor link, hopefully, right? It's an A tag with an href. And we're going to point our href at edit.php. And we'll title this as edit for now. Now we need to add some extra information onto edit. So remember I was talking about the query strings. Well, we're going to add a query string onto the end of edit. So the first thing we start with is a question mark. That's our first piece. That signifies that we're adding a query string. The next thing I'm going to add is ID for my key, because that's the name of the key. An equals sign. And then I need to be able to provide the ID from my row. So that's super easy for me to do. All I have to do is put in a PHP echo statement and type in $row ID. Makes for rather a long line. But it's super powerful. We'll do that again. I'm going to put a pipe character here just to separate it. I'm going to create an A tag, and this one's going to be called delete. My link is going to be delete.php. And then I'm going to add a query string to it. So I'm going to put a question mark saying what follows is a query string. The key for my query string will be ID equals, and I can't just hard code a value here, otherwise every single one of the things I delete will always be the same value. We need the value dynamically from the row, and we can get that data by just echoing out that particular value. So I'll use a shorthand echo statement and just output ID. If I hit refresh, you can now see that we have, Canada very cold 37 million edit and delete keys. If you hover over the edit and you look at the bottom left of your browser window, you will see a link there showing you that the first link has edit.php with an ID of equal to 1. The second one is 2, the third one is 3, and so on and so forth. Plus the deletes do the same thing as well, except for they go to delete PHP. Any questions so far about that? Will these links work currently? Like if I click edit, will it let me edit the record? I want you to look at it and think logically. Absolutely. Thank you, Matt and Jesse. Absolutely. We have to create the pages in order for us to be able to point to those things. Otherwise, this stuff doesn't get created. Is anybody still typing out? I don't want to switch pages before you guys are done. No? All right. We're going to create a new file called edit.php. And the good news is we're really just going to do a lot of copy and paste here. Jump over to your form.php page. Hit Control-A on your keyboard so it highlights absolutely everything. Control-C to copy. Go over to edit.php and paste it. We're going to use the exact same form for our edit.php page. The difference is right now we have the form action currently pointing at itself, which means that when we paste, it will actually publish right back to itself. I would much rather point it at some sort of script. So I'm going to change this from being this $_server PHP self to update.php, which we will have to create still. Can I paste this form here? I hope so. Sometimes it gets cut off. To me, it looks like it's all there. Hopefully, it's all there for you. Awesome. I'm also going to change the title from New Country to Edit Country, because that's what we're doing. We're editing. So if I click one of the edit buttons, it doesn't matter which one. If I click edit, it goes to that form on edit.php. It's loading our form. I know that because it says edit country up in the top in the tab, right? But this is a bit of a problem. If I want to edit this and I want to edit just the name and not the description, it's difficult for me to do that without knowing what they originally said. I would have to go back. Okay, so it's Canada very cold, 37 million. Click edit, and then make sure I remember that information so I'm only changing the values that I want to change. It would be much easier if this form just pre-populated with the correct values already. And so obviously we can do that because we have the power of PHP. We also have some information that we can use, the ID equals 2, that we can utilize in order to, connect to that and be able to grab the correct record. So we're obviously going to need some PHP on this page in order to make this work. So at the very top of the page, I'm going to create a PHP block. And in my PHP block, I'm going to need to fetch a row. Now, we've done this once before with the table, but we fetched everything. Like, we went and got all of the rows from the table. This time, I don't want all of the rows. I only want one, just one of those rows. So the first thing I need to do is create my connection string. So we'll write our connection string, and this will seem familiar because we wrote this last week as well. So I'm going to connect to localhost with my username of root, my null password because I don't have a password, and my database name, which is comp 1006 lesson 03. This is important. I had a lot of students reach out this week, like almost 5, reach out this week having difficulty connecting to their database, and the reason was they weren't connecting to the database at all. They were connecting to some other arbitrary thing. So make sure you're connecting to the database that we created, which is called comp 1006 lesson 3. If our connection is good, then we should be able to create a query. So I like to make my queries separate. So I create a string called SQL, and then I write my SQL query from there. So I'm going to write select star from countries where ID is equal to, and then this is where I need to get the identifier from the query string. Does anybody know what I would type to get the ID from the query string? I want you to think about superglobals. Yep, we're going to need to use get. Do you remember what the superglobal syntax looks like? How do I access the get superglobal? We know it's going to begin with a $sign because all variables do. Absolutely. Yep, that's exactly it. And then I want to access the ID key, so I'm going to put in the square brackets to represent that this is an array, right? And I want to access the ID index. So I just type in a couple of quote characters and ID in there. Next, I want to actually fetch my results. So I'm going to do that by typing in result equals MySQL query. The first argument I pass it is the connection, and the second argument I pass it is the SQL string. I'm going to actually move this one down so it's in line with that. So this is doing absolutely nothing. All this is just a string. Yes, it's nicely syntaxed highlighted for me because VS Code's super awesome, but it is doing nothing. It is just a string, okay? This, however, is actually executing that string. It takes the connection in so it knows where to send the SQL to, and then it connects to the database, and then it runs this query that we've typed in here against the database. The database is going to go ahead, it's going to select all the columns from countries, but only if it matches this particular criteria. There has to be a column called ID, and it has to match the specific ID that I am sending, which just happens to be 2. Last week we used MySQL fetch all, which allowed us to retrieve all of the records. I only want one record, so I'm going to use something called MySQL fetch association, which will receive only one record from my database. Or fetch ASOC if you want to call it that. I have to pass it the result because it's going to look at the result, decode it, and turn it into this row for me. If we want to see what the result is going to look like, we can always var dump our row, and that will give us a better idea of what we're looking at. So I'm going to hit, nope, not create, sorry. I'm going to hit refresh. And here you can see it actually grabbed the correct record. I have an ID of 2, yep, the 2, corresponds. I have a name of Canada, description very cold, and the population of 37 million. Plus I have the created at and updated at dates that we create by default inside our record. You missed absolutely everything, Manjinder, so far. You missed a lot so far. At the break, I'll publish what I've done, and then you can just download it. So I don't want to keep this row dump in here because it doesn't suit our application. But now I want to make sure that these values are actually being published inside these form fields. Does anybody know what attribute we use to pre-populate data inside a form field? What's the name of the attribute we use? I don't know how much you guys did with forms in your other classes. Not placeholder. You're on the right track, though. Placeholder is more like I'm hinting at what you need here. Exactly, Jesse. It's value. Value actually puts the value into there. Yeah. So we're going to add the value in. So here's our first input field. So I'll first copy this block of PHP for you guys so you have it. There you go. And then I'll scroll down and we'll do this. Because you wrote MySQI. It's MySQLi. So MySQLi _ connect. Staban. No worries. All right, so in the input, we're going to add a new attribute called value. And the value we're going to give it is a little bit of a PHP statement. So a PHP shorthand echo statement, $row, and we want to copy the same thing that we did here. It's called name, so we'll call it name. I'm going to save it and refresh, and as you can see, Canada is now populated in that field. For the text area one, it's a little bit different. You have to put your cursor between the opening and closing text area tags, and then we can put the statement in here, and it will populate it into the text area for us. Like so. Except for it picks up this extra block here, which is really annoying, so it might be better if you put it all on the same line. Doesn't look as attractive, but it's necessary so it doesn't do that. And then the last one is this one, which is the country population, and we'll just add the value in there, which is $row population. And there we go. Our whole form field is filled out. So now if we were to click create, it's not actually going to do anything. It's going to send this data off to the update.php page as we defined in the action, but we don't actually have an update.php page created. So it's not going to go anywhere and it's not going to do anything, right? See what I was saying? It did cut it off. Look at that. It pasted in the form and it cut off the whole top head part. But you guys should only need the body because we've already done that part anyways. Are you guys still with me? So let's walk through what we've done. We connected to MySQL, specifically to our Comp 1006 Lesson 3 database. We created a SQL statement, which is just a string, right? And stored it in this variable called SQL. Our SQL string is going to select all columns from countries where the ID column is equal to the past ID that we're getting from our query string, right? Make sure you guys fully understand what query strings are. If you need to, go back to lesson 2 where we actually talk about it. Our result will be the result of running the MySQLi query function, passing the first argument, which is our connection, and the second argument, which is the SQL we want to execute against the database. It's going to return back a result that we then need to decode, which we do with MySQL fetch association, and then we give it the result. All this is really doing is it takes that result that we get back and it converts it into whatever type of thing we want. So we can use ASOC, which is an associative array, or we could use object, so it actually converts it into an object. There's other things we can convert it to as well, but this is the easiest way to do that. Are the other files except edit.php from the previous class? Yes, they are. Yes, Benjinder. Edit.php is the only one that's not, but we edited the table and added in new things into the table. We also added in the Bootstrap style sheets into it as well, which I can give you. I can give you that link for this one. So you need to add this into the head on both the form. No, just the form. Yeah. Add that into the head on the form. And then you need this form, which has Bootstrap styles in it for form.php. And then in table.php, I'll just give you this code. Oh, good. Then you'll like this lab code too, because it's basically the same. All right. Is anybody, except for Manjinder, still behind? No siree. Awesome. Hopefully you guys have populated forms, which will be nice. Now we need to create our update.php page. The update.php page is going to be a big part of this because that is what's going to allow us to be able to update the values that we have. However, we have this same problem. So right now, in order for us to populate this form, we needed to know what row we were editing, correct? Well, the same issue is going to apply when we send all of this form data that we see here to our update.php page. We're going to need to know what row we're updating. Currently, we don't have that information in here. We have the name, we have the description, and we have the population. And while we could use those as a way to be able to query the database and say, hey, we want a row that matches these three things, we're still going to have a problem. If you look at our table, we have two rows with exactly the same data. So which row am I actually editing? There's no way to tell that currently with the way we have our form published. To fix that, we need to add another field. However, we don't want the user to see the field. So if I was to add another input here in our edit.php file, so input, and we'll give it a name, right, of ID, and the value of the current past ID, or we can just pull it from the row, which we might as well do so that it's uniform. Like so. That should work, right? However, if I refresh, I now have this field up here with the number 2 in it. And somebody could change that value to 7, and all of a sudden I would be editing the 7th row instead of the 2nd row. So how do we stop users from accidentally editing the wrong row? We do that by hiding the field. So we add a type equals hidden. It's still there on the page. If I right click and view the page source, you can see we have this hidden field with the value of number 2 in it, but the user can't see it. Is that secure? Absolutely 100% not, right? They can still affect that row. They could use JavaScript to change the value, or they could literally just right click, inspect, open up the inspector for that particular form, find this thing here, double click it, change it to 5, boom. Now we're editing number 5. If I right click and view the page source, It said 2 there, but trust me, when I submit this, it will say 5 in the update page. So no, it's not foolproof, right? We still have issues there where they could edit the wrong field, but the idea is that you're just trying to give the user a good user experience. If they want to screw up their database and edit the wrong row, that's their problem. That's not your problem. That's a them problem. What you do need to protect against is them screwing up somebody else's data, right? So you want to make sure that the user owns that data. We're not going to worry about that now, but when we talk about authentication, I will show you how we can actually ensure that the user isn't messing up somebody else's data. All right, so we need an update.php page because we currently don't have one. So we've got this input field. I'll copy this input field for you guys and paste it. There you go. Make sure you put that inside the form. Don't put it outside the form. I've had many students do that in the past where they paste these input fields outside the form and then they wonder why they don't get submitted. It has to be inside the form. Only the things contained within the form will go to update.php. So I'm going to create update.php. So I'm going to create a new file and call it update.php. And in update.php, for now, all I'm going to do is create a PHP block. And I'm just going to var dump whatever comes from the $post value. I'm going to click create over here. And if everything's good, you should see, if I zoom in a little bit, you should see these values were passed. Most specifically that you're getting the ID column. So now from this, we can access this ID value and use it to be able to pull data back from our database so that we can edit the correct row, right? So we're going to write an update, basically. One question, we're going to take a break here in a minute for 10 minutes. One question, though, before we do. Have you guys done update and delete in your database class yet? Oh, awesome. Awesome, awesome, awesome. Cool. All right, so that shouldn't be new for you guys for writing those SQL statements. That's great. Okay, so we're going to take a 10-minute break, and we will be back at 8:05. Minjinder, what I will do you have this code, or do you want me to put it up online for you to download? What's easier for you? You have it? Is it working? Yeah, delete doesn't work for anybody right now. We haven't implemented it. Like if I click delete, you get not found. We're going to implement it in a little while. Wait, do you mean like clicking on index and deleting the file? Why are you trying to delete the index file? Why do you want to delete the index file? One second, Gurleen. Minjinder, why do you want to delete the index file? It doesn't open edit. Huh? I don't know what you mean by that. Does you mean like if you click edit, it doesn't open edit? Or do you mean VS Code is not opening edit? Like your IDE is not opening edit? I think I'm just going to zip the code and send it to you. I'll put it on Blackboard and then you can just pull it down. I think that would be much easier than trying to do whatever it is that we're trying to do here. Yeah, I will in 1 second. Let me just put this up. There you go. Go ahead and grab that. Yes, Minjinder, recap. Okay, so we started from lesson 4 here. We talked a little bit about the idea that the pages are not very formatted nicely and cleanly looking. It was just basic HTML. So our first thing that we did was bring inside our form.php page, the Bootstrap Cdn. So the Bootstrap is like it's a CSS framework, and it allows us to be able to make things look really nice, kind of prototypal, but very nice and clean. It's really good when you're not a designer, right? You can use it for when you're not doing design. Oh, you did that last semester? Cool. So then we took our form and we added a div with a container around it, so that brought it in. And then we added form group to each of the divs, and then we added a form control to each of the inputs. That's what makes this look so nice. Then we went over to table.php, and we added a class of table and table striped and a margin of 5 to the top, so that brought it down, made this look all stripey and nice. But then we modified our for each loop. And the reason why we did this is because we want PH to be as much of a template language as possible, but we don't want it to interfere with our actual HTML syntax. We want our syntax to still look like the syntax it should be for HTML, not just a bunch of strings. So we took all the strings out and we wrote this using the PHP Shorthand Methods. So the way the shorthand methods work is they end in a colon, and then all you have to do to close it is make sure you add the word end in front of whatever the command is you're trying to close. So we created a for each loop, and then we ended the for each loop. Using my code, you're getting an invalid for each, Gerline. I'll have to look at it. You'll have to share your screen. 1 second. Yeah, just 1 second, Gerline. So then I have my TR tag here that I just write out like regular HTML. And then I use shorthand echo statements between each of the TD tags. If you look, it is much cleaner looking than it did with all of the strings. Yeah. After that, we wrote our edit link so that we could create these actions. And the way, it's working now? Okay, good. That seems to happen with you a lot, girly. And it seems like you tell me it's broken, and then 5 seconds later you figured it out and fixed it. All right, so anyways, the link here is just a regular link, right? Like any anchor link. So it goes to edit.php, but we added a query string. Do you remember when we talked about query strings in lesson 2? Yeah, so we added a query string ID equals. Obviously, we can't hard code the value or wouldn't know where to go, so we dynamically pull the value using a PHP echo statement. So this echoes out the ID, which if you hover over edit and look in the bottom left-hand corner, you will see that it's populated with ID equals 1 for the first one and ID equals 2 for the second one, and so on and so forth. Oh, okay, yep. That makes sense, Gerline, actually. Yeah. I don't have that nice stripy chart. Okay, hold on. I've got a whole bunch of people talking all at once. Thought it saw somebody post something. Why we have to use the pipe? We don't have to use the pipe, Steban. It just creates this nice separation look between edit and delete. That's the only reason I'm using the pipe character. I think I may have messed up something up in the Bootstrap part. Oh, just make sure in the table, Alec, that you have this class. So your table opening tag should look like that. Can you place all from start to end code for edit.php? Here I'm getting 2 errors. Actually, Sukhmanpreet, if you go to Blackboard, I just loaded all the code we just did up into Blackboard, like literally 2 seconds ago. Okay. Cool, that covers everybody. We kind of edited. No, we didn't really edit the old form. Oh, yeah, we kind of did. So I think I understand what you're saying, Manjinder. We took the form here, we copied and pasted into edit.php. We added a block up here to pull that record using that query string. The value from that query string is the ID. So what we're doing is we're pulling that row specifically based on that ID. We run the query and then we fetch it, right? And that gives us the row. And then inside our form, we populate the value. So that fills in all of the form fields for us. And the reason why we do that is so that we can easily see, what the field values are so that we can update them. It's going to update the row, not add a new one. That's the goal. It will modify this. So if you change this from Canada to India and then you post it, it should automatically update it. Mine is working, but in edit.php it shows the table, but it also shows notice and warning. Is it fine? In edit.php, all you should see, Gurleen, is this file. That's it. Like, are you going to this address, out of curiosity? That's the address you should be going to. And you shouldn't see any errors. Nice. And are you getting errors, Gurleen, or is it working now? Okay. Did you add edit.php to the index.php page, Gurleen? Because you shouldn't have. Oh, you were using the wrong link. Okay. Do you like my video feed? What video feed? From your lab? It is? Oh, I can't see it when I'm sharing. It doesn't let me see it. Yeah. Oh, wait, actually it will. Hold on. Oh, yeah. It's a little dude. Looks a little bit like Link. That's pretty cool. That is cool. Yeah, I tend to collapse that because all the windows in WebEx sit on top of everything, so it's always in the way. So I always tend to collapse it. Yeah. Oh, did you really? That's awesome. You're a very good artist. Alright, it's already 8:05. We're already done our break. I didn't even actually pause. We just recorded all through that. Okay, it sounds like everybody's kind of like caught up and where they should be, which is good. We have our edit.php page here, and we're now going to be posting. So if I hit create, it posts all that to the update.php page. So our update.php page right now, all it is doing is just var dumping the stuff. That's it. So we need to we need to actually create our update. So we're going to do this nice and nice and nice, right? We're going to create our connection first. Every time we create these PHP pages, we'll be creating a connection until we learn how to abstract it and make it better. Oh, there we go. MySQL connect localhost root null lesson 03. I said Link. I said you look like Link. I definitely didn't say Zelda. I mean, I was the 12-year-old playing the original Zelda on the Nintendo. Yeah, the Nintendo, actually. Jeez, not even the Super Nintendo, the Nintendo. This is instead of var dump, right? Yeah, I'm just replacing var dump. I got rid of it. Wait, why are we posting the database? What are we asking, Marcos? Did you ask a question and I missed it? Oh, you're telling me. Yeah, no, I screwed up. Yeah, no, I see that now. Sorry, I get distracted easily because I have terrible ADHD. Absolutely terrible ADHD. So it just takes nothing. One comment in the chat channel and I'm distracted. So this is our connection, right? It's connecting to localhost using our root username. Null for the password. com1006 to less than 03 for the database. So the next thing we want to do is write our SQL query. So I like to put them in a string just because it makes it nice and easy. But I don't like writing the whole string out on one line, especially when it's an update or an insert, because there's so much information to write that it gets a bit confusing what you're looking at, right? So the easiest way I do it is I write the first statement, update countries set, right? Or insert into table, right? Then on the next line, I tab in and I write the rest of the pieces. So this one will be name equals, and that's where the name is going to go. So it's in quotes. Description equals, and that'll be in quotes. Actually, these don't need to be butted up against each other like this. There, that's a little cleaner. Population equals, and then my where clause. Where ID equals. So each of these are going to be, obviously, variables. So I'll put in the little curly braces so it's easy to distinguish where the variables are going to go. By the way, I can't wait till we switch over to PDO because this looks so much cleaner when you write it with PDO. And now we can insert our variables which are coming from our super globals. Yes, no, you're entirely right. It's an int, so we don't use those. Yes, you are correct. Nice catch. So for name, we're going to do name or $_post. And I'll use single quotes here. I mean, it doesn't really matter either way. This entirely, the curly braces, entirely abstract it so you don't wind up with weird collisions with the quote characters, which is kind of convenient. Oops, $_post. Of course, when I did that, it deleted it. Square brackets. Description. And then this one's $_post. Population. And then the last one will be $_post ID. And I will definitely copy that SQL statement for you. There you go. I like to actually bring the SQL statement down to where I'm actually going to do the call. So obviously, this is just a string. That's all it is. I've had so many students in the past get super confused and think that this is actually doing something. Because I've had students actually hand in labs and assignments before, even projects, where all they did was write the SQL statement and thought it was doing something. So that leads to another thing as well. Test your code. Always make sure your code is working. Don't just hand in code that you copied and pasted out of a lab or something like that and figured it would work. Make sure it actually does work, because you do lose marks when it doesn't work. So we want to actually store the result from this. So here we go, MySQL I. Yeah, the confusing part, Manjinder, is the fact that it's also syntax highlighted, so it's not even just the data type, it's also that it's syntax highlighted. So you think it's actually doing something, but it's not. But yeah, no, I entirely agree with you. Because there's no data typing in PHP, it does make things a bit confusing to know that it's a string. But just remember that we're implicitly typed. So if you see quote characters, it's a string. MySQLi query, right? We're always using this statement. This is our common go-to statement, con, and $, if I can find the $ key, SQL. That will execute this query against our database connection. So the SQL reads like this. Update any row in the countries table. So that's what it means. Any row whatsoever in the country table, and set the columns name equal to whatever our post value is, which is currently Canada. Oh, we're using post, Marcos, because, okay, so the reason why we're using post is because our form from edit.php is posted to the update.php page. So we don't use get here, we use post, because the HTTP method that it used to get the data from the form to the update.php page was post. Yeah. The reason why we used get here was because this ID we got from the query string up in the top, and it used the get HTTP method. We're going to be talking about HTTP methods so much in this class. You guys will get very familiar with them and be able to talk circles around people with them. So yeah, update any row in countries, set the column name equal to name, the column description equal to this value, and the population column equal to this value, but only if the ID matches the past ID. That's what it's saying. So our update statement ends with a where conditional statement. This is because if we didn't restrict the update, and if MySQL was not set to strict mode, which it currently is, it would literally update every single row in the database. Yes, exactly. So there wouldn't be a single row that didn't get updated. Out of curiosity, in your SQL class, are you guys using IDs now? Now that they've introduced update and delete? Okay, good. Good. That makes me happy to hear. So obviously you need to make sure there's a where clause or you run a risk. You can prevent that if your database is set to strict mode. You can also set up rules that don't allow batch updating without a where clause. So basically what happens is you go to execute this, and it won't allow it to affect any of the rows because the where clause is missing. So there is protection settings in MySQL to prevent that, but they have to be, I don't think they're explicitly turned on. I think you have to, or implicitly turned on, sorry. I think you have to explicitly turn them on. You have to actually go and do that. Also notice that we've wrapped all our post statements in these curly braces, right? That's to signify that this is a template string, right? And we are actually parsing the data out of those to get their values. And one way you can do that, to see that, is if you just var dump the SQL statement, you can see what SQL it produces. So here I am refreshing, and as you can see, we have update countries, set name equal to Canada, description equals very cold, population equals 37 million, word ID equals 1. You could actually copy and paste this directly into your SQL workbench and execute it, and it would run just fine. So keep this in mind, that dumping your SQL is sometimes a good idea, especially if you're having a lot of difficulty figuring out what's going on and why your SQL isn't working, right? Dump your SQL, take a look at it, and if it isn't obvious, then throw it into Workbench and just execute it in Workbench and see if it works. And if Workbench will definitely give you an error and tell you why it's not working. So we're running this query, but we should also figure out whether or not the query actually worked. And the easiest way to do that is by checking the result. So the MySQL query will return true if the query worked. So if it worked, all we can do is echo the country was updated successfully. There we go. Otherwise, or better known as else, which means we failed, there was an error updating the record. And actually, we should put a quote in here, or a colon in here, and then concatenate our MySQLi error. and we just give it the connection. Now what this will do is it will actually just output the last error that happened, which is usually the last SQL statement that you were making that caused that error. So if I refresh, it's going to ask me, it's going to say the country was updated successfully. Every time I refresh, it's just going to say the same thing, and all it's doing is constantly rerunning the same post against that code, which is weird. Usually it asks you. Usually asks you if you want to resubmit. I'm surprised it's not. So now I didn't really do much data-wise. Like I didn't really change the data. Let's change the data. I'm going to edit this second record. And I'm going to change it to India. And can anybody tell me what the temperature is in India today? Is it warm or is it cold? Or is it hot? It's cold right now. And what's the population? Actually, hold on. Hey Google, what's the population of India?
In 2019, the population of India was 1,366,000,000.
So 1,366,000,000. I'm not writing the rest of those numbers. Is that 6 zeros? 6 zeros. Great. The country was updated successfully. Well, let's actually see if it was updated successfully. Yes, it was. Nice. We win. So there is one problem. This shouldn't say create, right? That button, that's a misnomer. It shouldn't say create. So in our edit.php page, let's scroll down to where the button is and change that from create to update. If we refresh, it now says update. So the good news is that deleting an existing row in our database is not that much different than updating, except for that we don't go through a form. When we go to our page here, which I'm just modifying this and going to lesson 4 each time, when I click delete, all it needs to do is go to a script, delete whatever it is, and then tell me that it was successfully deleted. That's it. So the first thing we're going to do is create a new file called delete.php. And delete.php isn't going to be that far from edit.php actually, or update.php. In fact, I'm going to split my screen, and I'm going to put update over to the right here so that you guys can still see it. I'm going to collapse my sidebars so that you just see update and delete. And I can follow along with the code here for most of it actually. I can change my PHP here. My connection string is exactly the same. Right? It's just localhost. The username is root. Password is null. And the database is comp1006. Lesson 03. Our SQL is going to be a little different. So we'll just do that. But our MySQL statement is the same. Or not our MySQL statement, sorry. Our MySQL function call is the same. Still just going to be $con and $SQL. And then our error handling, again, is going to be exactly the same. We're just going to check for results. And if the result is good, we'll just echo the country was deleted successfully. Otherwise, we're going to echo there was an error updating the record with a colon, and then we'll concatenate the MySQL I error, $con, on top of that. So now all we're left with at this point is writing our SQL statement. Does anybody want to take a chance at what the SQL statement looks like? Just type it out and throw it into the chat channel for me. Because you guys have already written SQL statements. I mean, you probably wrote a delete statement today, I'm sure. Yeah, delete from. That's definitely where we're going to start. Delete from where? Where are we deleting from? What table? Yep, countries. Now, we don't want to just run that, because if we run just that by itself, we'll delete absolutely everything. I'm not sure what you mean, Manjinder. What stops working and then works fine if you reset? Wamp stops working and then works fine? Update? I don't know. Where? Hold on, let me finish this with POW here. Where ID equals... Nope, not set. POW's correct. It's where ID equals. We don't set anything. And what am I writing here? This is the tricky part. Look at what we did in update, and then try to think about what we would write over here in delete. What makes the most logical sense? Oh, Matt flies in with the win there. And Marcos, for that matter. All right. So we're going to add in our curly braces, where ID equals $_post, the square brackets, and the ID. Now, we have a bit of a problem here. I can delete. Oh, no, I can't delete. Undefined index ID on delete.php. What have we done wrong? There's something wrong with our code. I'll give you a hint. Matt was on the right track. Wrong HTTP method, though. Because we are not submitting a form. We are clicking a link. Can anybody decipher my cryptic message here? That's your hint. Wrong HTTP method. Right idea, just wrong HTTP method, which would affect our super global that we're using. There we go. There you go, Marcin. That's exactly it. We need to change post to get. Now if we refresh, the country was deleted successfully. But that's going to lead to another problem as well, because now we don't warn the user in any way. They click delete, off it goes. They come back, refresh, it's gone, right? That makes it super easy to delete them all, right? They can just keep clicking delete and accidentally deleting them. That is not a good user experience. That is a super bad user experience. So how do we improve their user experience? Well, let me show you how. We open up our table.php page. We're going to throw delete over there, just in case you guys are still typing it out. And we're going to come down here to our links. Okay? In our links, we're going to write a little chunk of code. We are going to write on click equals, and then inside here, we're going to write return confirm are you sure? And we're not going to put it there. I don't know why I'm putting it there. Sorry, we need to put it on the delete. And that should work. I don't think we need to prevent default. Let's see. I'll delete this. Oh, yeah, it would have helped if I had to refresh the page. There we go. Let's try deleting Shinopolis. Yes. Are you sure? Cancel? Nope, we don't. Yes. So now we get this prompt that will actually pop up and stop us from deleting accidentally. However, if I click OK, then it deletes properly. So replace your delete link with this link inside your table. Just a little tiny chunk of JavaScript that basically helps us stop the user from accidentally deleting something. And don't worry if you don't know JavaScript. It's totally fine. I don't expect you to. So we have one other problem with our whole application, and that's when we create a new item in here, and we click Create, it says the new country was created successfully. However, if I refresh, I can keep refreshing, and every time I refresh, it creates a new country. See? Look at all that. Isn't that terrible? That is terrible. Yeah, I can copy and paste the code for you, Gerline. It was over here on the side, though. But there you go. So the way we stop that is by changing where the user is currently located. We have to take the user from being on the process.php page, redirect them to another page that gives them the notification of, yeah, your new country was created successfully, and prevents them from hitting refresh. So they can hit refresh on that page, but it won't execute the process.php page, because that's what's currently occurring when they are here inside the form.php and they submit. It's going to the process.php page, executing, and then stopping our script at this line. When they refresh, it starts from up here again, executes all of this code, and ends here again. So every time they hit refresh, we're just executing this same code over and over and over again. Not good. We need to make it so that when they hit refresh, it actually changes from this code to a totally different page, like a totally different script, and then it forces them to go through there, and then if they hit refresh, nothing happens. We could clear the post. That is true. Yeah, we could make it so that once we get down here, we just simply erase the post value, and then if they hit refresh, it doesn't do anything. They would just get the page back the regular way. That's still not optimal, though. Optimal is to redirect them entirely. So that way they're not submitting the same request again and again either. If we redirect them, their whole post request disappears. Like, you can erase this post value all you want. When they hit refresh, they resubmit the post value. That's the problem. So I can show you what I mean. Let's say, don't write this, but say we follow what Menjinder is suggesting. If I take $_post and just make it equal to an empty array. There we go. So that you would think would clear it, right? But the problem here, so it's created this successfully. It's going to re-execute this page when I hit refresh. So it's definitely added another one. Here, let's add something new. Actually, let's delete all of these. Yeah, that's annoying. Hold on. I went haywire and created way too many of them. And we didn't create a way to bulk delete. So we'll just delete. Delete from countries where name equals ASDF. What's wrong with that? Oh, you're using safe update. This is exactly what I was talking about. So safe update, and you tried to update the table. Can you show me the whole message instead of cutting it off? Uses a where that uses the key column to disable safe mode. Stop disappearing. Toggle option in preferences. Preferences. Where in preferences? Probably defaults. Nope. SQL. Right here. SQL mode to be used for generated scripts. Oh, the SQL editor? Query editor, enable completion in editors, object editors, SQL execution. Continue SQL scripts on errors, new connections, limit rows, treat binary, confirm data, preserve row filter. Click the drop down. Oh, right on top of SQL Editor. Ah ha ha. Restore expanded state, show contents. Safe updates right here at the bottom. Okay. Now execute it. Oh, I bet you I need to disconnect. How do I disconnect from this? I'll just connect to a different database, and then I'll reconnect to that database. Okay, now execute. Ah! It doesn't like me. I think I actually have to disconnect and then open the new connection to make it apply. Yeah, that's exactly it. All right, drop it. Yeah, drop the database. That solves all the problems. Okay, so Minjinder, so when does the query run? When we initialize it or when we call it in the if statement? Huh? So this query runs the second this thing hits. So the second you hit the MySQL query statement, that's when it runs. So it's currently checking to see if this is set, and then it will execute. Yeah, so I'm going to show you how that works. So I'm going to, look, it actually created another one already. To make it stop, I have to go to the page fresh. So I'll do ASDF, 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 ASDF. There we go. Okay, so I'm going to create that. So now, when it comes down, if following what you were suggesting, Minjinder, this should clear it out, right? And we shouldn't have to worry about it again. How, unfortunately, though, that's not the way it works. It's just going to keep doing it. And the reason why is because the post is not set by PHP. The post is set by your browser. So when we create the request, the post is set by the browser, and then PHP turns it into this post value and then uses it. So we can't stop it because we can't clear the browser from doing it. The only way we can clear the browser from doing it is by going to the page fresh. Now that I've gone to the page fresh, I can hit refresh 10 million times and it won't create a new one. Yeah. So the easiest way around that is by going to a fresh new page. When we go to a fresh new page, then it prevents it from being allowed to create the same thing again. In order to do that, we need to do something called redirects. What a redirect does is it takes you from the current page you're on and moves you to a different page by taking the request you submitted and sending it to that other page. So that's what we're going to do. We're going to do a redirect, but there's a couple of pieces that we need in order to do this. Let me just make sure I'm not missing anything before we get into that. Yeah. All right, so this is like a whole lecture. I forgot about that. So this gets into the whole better notification system that we're going to take a look at. So the internet, as I stated before, is stateless. As I stated before. This means changes you make in your browser or in the client, right, are not reliable. They don't stick around. We need server-side technologies like databases, file systems, stuff like that in order to maintain permanent state. Currently, when we perform an operation, we inform the user that their change has an error or has been successful, right? So we process our script and then we hit that check where we check the result. If the result has been good, then we respond with, hey, everything is great. Otherwise, we respond with, no, things, messed up. So we inform the user that their change had an error or was successful by displaying a message in our mutable action. So that's where we're making a problem because we're actually displaying that message in the processing script. So if they hit refresh or anything like that, or God forbid they bookmark it, every time they go there, it's going to create another record. So the problem with this strategy is the user can perform the action more than once. By simply refreshing the page, they can insert another record, send another update, or perform a second delete. However, updates and deletes are considered idempotent, meaning that they will not cause any disastrous effect on the database if they execute again. A delete cannot delete something more than once. And an update cannot update something more than once, right? If it's the same data. So you don't have to worry about that. However, if we're creating something, it will create another record as it is considered non-idependent. So just keep that in mind. It is important to remember that our code will likely change as our application matures, right? So because of this, we need to treat all action pages. So action pages are pages that do something mutably but don't necessarily display something, as potentially non-idependent. Plus, it's easier to maintain common strategies like notifications if the actions are handled the same way. So let's look at what our goal is by seeing how our application currently flows. So this is Tom. He says, "Hi, I'm Tom." Any of you that have seen 50 First Dates knows about that. Anyways, "Hi, I'm Tom." Tom sends a GET request to his form, right? The form gets produced to him. He fills out the form, and then he sends a post request to insert.php. So that's currently what's happening to us. Tom fills out the form, and we send it to process.php. That's the difference there. When Tom goes to edit something, he retrieves the table, clicks the edit link, gets the edit form, and then he posts that to update.php. Yep, that's the way it works currently. If Tom goes to delete something, he gets the table, clicks the delete link, and then that takes him to deleting the PHP, or to the delete.php page, but he uses a GET request to do that. When Tom views all countries, he just goes to table and he's able to see all the countries. We don't currently do it that way. Tom goes to index, then he sees all the countries. So one key observation we can make by our current application is that the user always starts at a visual page. So the user is always starting at one of these different types of visual pages. That makes sense as they need to interact with it, right? The user can't interact with the code. He can only interact with something he can visually see in the browser. When the user clicks or submits, a request is made and sent to the destination either through the GET HTTP protocol, so that's usually caused by clicking a link or typing something into the address bar, or the POST HTTP method, which is usually always done from a form. Another observation we can make is that all form submissions use HTTP POST methods to send the data to the destination, because inside our forms we've been defining a method as POST, and that the destination is always a processing script. So visual pages are pages where you actually that it's visual and it renders to the screen, and processing pages are pages that shouldn't actually produce any output. They should only process whatever it is, interact with the database, and then move you to another visual page. So if you can follow me here, let's separate our actions by their types. Views, that's what we're going to call our visual pages, like our form, our table, right? Those are views. Views should only return visual responses, meaning that they should render your HTML so that you can visually see what they're doing. They should always return some sort of visual response. Scripts should process data, but instead of calling them scripts, I like to call them action pages. Our action pages should be actionable. They should do something with the data. They should never produce a view. So if we were to modify the way we're doing this, we would make it where Tom accesses the form, he submits the form, that goes to our process.php page. When the process.php page is complete, whether it throws an error or whether it doesn't, it should send you to another page. It should send Tom to another page to see the notification. By doing this, the post request gets destroyed here, gets turned into a GET request, and off he goes to that page where he can't accidentally resubmit it. So let's create the notification.php page, which we're not going to do. We're going to talk about the next part of it first. I don't know why I did that way. This is old. This gets into the session superglobal associative arrays. So far the associative arrays that we have talked about, the superglobal associative arrays, are the $_ get array, the $_ post array, and the $_server array. Those are the three that we've looked at so far. The super global session associative array, which really is the most super of all of them, is really kind of interesting. When we create a get associative array, it lasts for one complete request lifecycle, which means you click the link, it creates that variable. That variable becomes available on the next page where you're located with your information. So it is one request lifecycle. Post is the same way. You click the link, it lasts for one request lifecycle. Once you get to that page, though, it disappears after you leave that page. As long as you're on that page, that data remains. Same with get. Sessions, though, live for the life cycle of your session, which is until you close your browser. Once you close your browser, then the session will disappear. However, if you have the session, you can add values into it and keep those around for longer, right? Once you close the browser is done, that's it, session is gone. If you need things to persist longer than the browser is alive, then you need to use something like cookies. Cookies will actually last forever, right? Until you delete them, or unless you set an expiry on them. So we need to create some session variables, but there's a few key things we have to do in order to do that. Hold on, let me scroll down to my session parts. All right. We're going to create a notification page where we send everything to, but we kind of need a place to actually start from that point. Oh, like save passwords. Yeah, cookies are usually used to save passwords. Yeah. Sessions are used to maintain a password's maintain a password state during the time that you're in the browser. Cookies are for when you close your browser and come back and it remembers you. You need to add cookies into your relationships so that they last longer than your browser instance. Is that the idea, Esteban? Or so you can save passwords. I don't know what you mean by that. Anyways, let's deal with some sessions here. So there's two key things that we need to understand about sessions. One, a session needs to be initialized or resumed before you output anything to the browser. That is super, super important. You cannot start your session or resume your session after you have output any content to the browser. It will blow up and tell you that you have done bad things. So that's the thing to remember. The second rule is you have to initialize or resume the session. You can't access session variables or add to session variables unless you have started the session. So to start the session, because we're going to use session variables in here, to start the session, we first need to call the command session start. I'm in process.php in case you forgot where we are. So session start. So that's going to either resume the session if the session isn't already resumed. Sorry, if the session is not already initialized, it will initialize it. Otherwise, if it already exists, it resumes it. Next, I don't want to echo these things because this is not where we should be doing this. We should be sending this to our next page. I'm going to get rid of that post that I wrote. So instead, I'm going to save this value. And I'm going to save it in my session variable. So you're noticing I'm writing it just the same way I would get or post. We'll just call it message. And we'll make it equal to the value you see here. With the error message, we can do the same thing. We'll just write a little bit easier of a message here. So we'll do $_session message equals, and we'll copy this. And we'll concatenate the error. And we'll add a quote or a colon thing at the end of it. So now what's going to happen is our session is going to start. Whatever the result is, right? If it's a positive result, then we'll wind up adding this successful message. If it's a negative result, then we'll wind up adding this error message with the error, like the actual error that happens. We're not done yet, though. We need to leave this page and go somewhere else so that the user can't accidentally refresh this page. So what we're going to do is we're going to redirect. And the way we do that is by setting a header. This is a command that you can use to set different types of headers, and it will add them to the request, and then you can teleport the person from there to another location with those extra headers. That includes things like authorizations, cookies, session storages, stuff like that. Tons of different stuff. We're only going to use it to relocate. And the way we do that is we do location, like so, with a colon and a space, and then the name of the location that we want to go to. Can I explain headers? Yeah. Header allows us to add headers to requests. So if you look at a request, let me show you a request. So here's my thing. Here's my network tab. Let's just look at any one of these, really. We'll look at index.php because that is a request. Headers are these things that you see here. So here's my response headers, but the headers that I'm talking about are our request headers. That command in PHP allows you to set these explicitly if you want to. So you can set your encoding type, your language types, how long your cache lives, what type of keep alive connection you're using, your host, your upgrade insecure, your agent. You can actually go ahead and modify all those with your headers. You can also set cookies using headers as well. You don't necessarily need to use the cookie associative array. You can actually set them directly in the headers. You can also set things like authentication and stuff like that in the headers too. So like the header we get in get, like the header you literally get in everything, whether it's get, post, or put, patch, delete, which you guys haven't had experience with yet. It's literally the headers that get sent with every single request, regardless of what the HTTP method is. It's not something that you use, like you don't use headers often when you first start out programming, but when you really get into it, it becomes fairly crucial to your programming. Especially if you're doing like big architected applications, like really big applications, headers can come in extremely important. Because they do a lot of different things. But the one we're using right now really just deals with redirects. That's what we're handling right now. So we're going to set our location. So you just literally type location with a capital L, and then where the location points to, and the location is going to point to notification.php. That's it. Location a predefined header? Yes, it is. All of these headers that you create have to be exactly as they're detailed. And you can go find other headers just by doing a Google search. Yeah, you can create your own ones. Yeah, actually, you don't even have to create a new one. You just literally add whatever you want into the header, and it just becomes part of the header. Like, that's kind of how authentication works a little bit. Like, if you were to do header Sean is awesome. I think this will work. Hold on. We need to create something, but we also need to keep this open. So function F12. Okay, so here's where our request will go. I'll create a new request. Create. Notification.php is not found, but we should see, there's our cookie with our session ID. We should see the Sean, is it not in the request? Maybe it's in this request. I know you can definitely create your own. Maybe I'm just not seeing it. It might be because it failed, so it didn't hit an endpoint. But yes, I'm pretty sure you can create your own. I might be wrong, actually, now that I think about it. I might be wrong. I'd have to test it, Manjinder. I think you can, though. I think you can create your own headers. You might have to put them under something else. We didn't call PHP before. Yeah. We need to actually create the notification for it. Oh, hold on. You're distracting me. I need to get to the last part. The last thing about this, you can't just redirect and not exit. You need to exit your script. And the reason why that's so important is because if you don't exit, it will redirect to another page and then continue parsing your script. Okay? Well, that's not a big deal when we're already at the bottom of the page. This is a habit that I want you to get into. Always call exit after header relocate. Because when you're relocating, it will continue to parse your script and odd things will happen. What I've seen a lot of people do is get an error and then redirect. Meanwhile, they have a whole bunch of code that happens underneath after the error. And of course, it keeps parsing the error. Right? So, it's not a good idea. So get in the habit of writing your header line and your exit all together. So you need this exit too. There we go. All right, we're going to create our next page called notification.php. Notification.php. We need a big PHP block. And we need to think about this a little bit. So, session variables, they last for how long? How long does a session variable last for? Exactly. So here's where a problem can occur. We set our session variable to the new country was created, right? That lasts for the length of our browser. If we submit something and get an error, it should override that value, and then we should see the error here. Actually, so yeah, it's not going to cause a problem. Oh, but if the user comes back to the notification page at any point, they will see the error still, and that could be confusing. So that means we do need to think about getting rid of the error message once we've shown it to the user. So here's how we're going to deal with that. First of all, we have to start our session. Otherwise, we can't even access those variables. We have to start the session. Next, we're just going to check and see if the session exists. So if the session, we need to set if it's set. Is set, and that's a function call. And we're looking for message. So we're checking to see if that's set. If it's set, then what we're going to do is just simply echo it out for now. We'll just echo it out to the page. And then because we don't want them to come back to notification and see that message again, we need to unset the session message. So the easiest way to do that is it unset session? No. Session unset? Yes, session unset. And that will unset that session message. Can we have multiple sessions and specify which session we are resuming? Yes, I believe so. Yeah, you can. You can also hijack existing sessions. So you have to think of it this way. Your server is one computer, right? You have one computer at the end running PHP. You have 20 people connecting to your one computer. See where I'm going with this? Those 20 people all get their own sessions. By default, that's just how the internet works. They get 20 sessions. Your server needs to know what session it's working on so it knows what code it's executing for that person. So it needs to make sure that the right person gets the right information, and it uses a session to be able to tell that. However, a person in the middle can hijack that other person's session and resume it for themselves. So you can actually have two people sharing one session. That is possible. You can also have one person with multiple sessions that you just switch between. It's not something you would do, though. It's not something you intentionally want to do. I can't even really think of an instance where you would do it, actually. I've never done it. In the 15 years I've programmed, I've never done it. It's handled internally by Apache. Has nothing to do with the port. It's 100% by Apache. Apache's the one that assigns them the sessions. It actually creates a cookie. So you just kind of saw that actually. F12. Create. So here's our notification page, right? If you look in here, there's our session ID. So it creates a session, and then Apache looks for that session ID. And that's how it knows what information to send to this person. So if you had your own session connected to the same server, I can use your session ID instead, make a request with your session ID, and gain back whatever information is you're looking for. That's why you don't share this key with anybody. And also, other programs do this too. Like JavaScript does it, but it doesn't store it in the headers. It stores it in the application session storage. So it will store it in here as a key called session ID. It just depends on the server you're working with. They all store it differently. But you can notice, like, even in index, there'll be that cookie as well. So there's a session ID. Ends in JDV. Notice it doesn't change. Where's the session cookie? JDV. It doesn't change. So some ways you can deal with security is get a header in a request. I'm not sure what you mean. This is a GET request. Notification.php was a GET request that we created. It was a 301 redirect that got sent to here, so it's automatically using the HTTP method GET. Are you asking if you can retrieve a header out of a request? Because you can. You can access the headers even from within the browser. You can actually access the header information. So, and that can be a problem, right? So, these cookies can be read by an application that you're in. The idea is that this PHP session ID is being set by our application, and only the front end of our application can read it. That's where you get into scenarios where third-party JavaScript files can read this cookie and then pull the data from that cookie and send it off somewhere else. Actually, I forget how to access it. Is it the cookie? It's not cookie store. No, it's not cookie store. It's cookies. JavaScript access cookies. Yeah. Document.cookie, that's what I'm looking for. See, there's our session ID. A simple JavaScript file could pull this value. See where that could be a problem, right? Because if they can pull the value and they can pull the refer, then they can technically send in a session request with that in their header as part of their own cookie and send a request to your PHP server and assume this person's role. So it gets kind of complex. There are security measures that you take in order to avoid that. I mean, it's out of the scope of this class, but there are security measures that you need to learn in order to avoid that. We're going to do stuff that stops that anyways in this class, kind of. That it won't really be an issue. Anyways, so when we're done our notification, we unset our session, we echo out our message, and that's basically it. So let's see. As you can see, I posted that thing. I get the new country was created successfully, but if I refresh, the message disappears because the session is no longer set. So this message is now gone. Okay? So we've done it for create. We should do it for the other ones as well. So this is our process script. We should do it for our update. Where's update? There it is. So let's do this again. So it's session store or session start. Do we need to exit in notification? No, you're only exiting when you do a header relocate, because what happens is the script will actually continue processing in the background even after you've relocated to a new page. So you have to do exit when you do header relocation. $_session message equals, not minus, equals. And then this one we'll do $_session message equals, and then down here is where we'll do our header relocate. So we'll locate, or location I should say, to brain stopped working. Notification.php. Notification.php. And we have to exit. You can also die. So die is an alias of exit, and for some reason students I've had before prefer die over exit because they think it's cool, so they write die. So you can either do die or exit. It's totally your choice. It means the same thing. It just kills the script. Die! Yeah. Don't write it in all capitals though, it will fail. But yeah. So now when I go to do an edit, so here's Canada, it's very cold. It's actually not that bad today. It's about... Hey Google, what's the temperature outside?
The current temperature in Aurelia is minus 12 degrees.
Yeah, 12
Due to
degrees.
current wind conditions, it feels like it's minus 18.
Feels much colder. According to Goog. And I can update that, and as you can see, it takes me to my notification page, and it says the country was updated successfully. How can you spot edgy students from the rest? Because they do die. It's that it automatically points out all the emo kids because they use die. And the introverts all use exit. That's how it works. You can actually alias your own too. You could always create your own alias. Quit calling me out. Alright, so the country was updated successfully, so that is working as well, which is good. So I will give you that code that you're going to put into your update.php. Update.php 12v. I mean, in the 90s, I was a goth kid, which was basically like the 90s version of being emo, I guess. And I was an introvert. Maybe someday. I had long hair, like, down to my elbows. Now I'm bald, but it fell out after a while. Alright, so we're going to change delete now. Delete.php is our next one that we need to change. And it's the same thing. You guys should actually already be ahead of me, probably. Session start. The pass away function. Yep. $_session message equals $_session. Make sure you're deleting the echo statement, because otherwise you will get very bizarre results. Chances are it will just fail and you'll get an error. And then obviously we're going to header location. And hopefully you guys are starting to think, hey, we're doing the same stuff over and over again. Why wouldn't we just write a function, right? And that's kind of the way you should start thinking about this type of stuff. How can I consolidate this and make it so that it's, dry? Don't repeat yourself, right? That's what dry stands for. I had PHP with Rich Freeman way back when I took the web course, and he used to find it funny because I would make everything super dry, so that it was like only one location where something would execute. So he would give us a lab with like starter files, and I would just throw the starter files away and rewrite all the code, because at the time when I was there, I was only just there to get the paperwork. I'd already known the language, but it was pretty fun. But he did appreciate that I was always thinking in a dry way, that I was always trying to make sure that my code was super modular and super dry. And that obsession has only increased over the years as I've been writing in other languages, making sure everything is super dry. Eventually you get into writing something called metacode at some point in your existence, in your career, where you're actually having functions that create functions on the fly dynamically with dynamic instructions inside them. Or you start learning very cool design patterns like factories and dependency injections and stuff like that. Good night, sweet prince. Will we make a function in index to access in all, or in the connect.php as it is included in the first? We're going to create a proper connect.php in a few weeks. that we will include as a module. So the problem with this connect.php that we're using right now, Minjinder, is that this isn't right. We're banking on this particular variable existing at all times, right? And that's not good coding. This is terrible code. Like, the code we're writing is absolutely atrocious, actually. But what we should be doing is creating a function called connect. And then in our connect function, we pass localhost, root, and the name of the database that we want to connect to, plus our password. And then it returns back a connection to us that we use going forward. And that's just called connect, which is essentially what MySQL connect is doing. However, I wait to do that because MySQL connect is so small that this code here is super easy to write. We're going to be using here, Liquid is bad for computers. Absolutely. What's JDBC? I don't think I know that one. Is that like a DSL? Is it a data service layer? Oh, okay. I think I understand what you're talking about. I think it's a data service layer. We're not going to create our own. Well, yes, we are going to be using a data service layer called PDO. And basically what PDO allows you to do is to connect to any SQL type database with the same type of commands, because connecting to SQL databases is different depending on the SQL database you're connecting to. And also running queries against those databases can be different. So PDO basically creates a way. It's not an API. It's definitely a DSL. It creates a way that it abstracts that from you, so that instead of you needing to write specific code to connect to Postgres or to MS SQL or to MySQL, you just write one set of code, and whatever database is connected, the DSL takes care of that. So no, it's not like an API. You're thinking more like REST and stuff. That's different. Yeah, DSL stands for Data Service Layer. Data Service Layer, or DSL. Yeah. There's tons of them out there. There's also ones that get a little bit more cool than that, like ORMs. ORMs, which stands for Object Relational Mappers, and there's hundreds of these things all over the internet. They basically take your database and turn it into class-based objects. And then you interact with your database, usually using some sort of query building language. To give you an idea, for the length of time I've been coding, I have written raw SQL only when I do classes with you guys. Otherwise, I never write raw SQL. I always use a query builder language. So when I worked for Mintent, it was Active Record. When I worked with Fireside, it was Active Record. When I worked with Laravel, it was Eloquent. And now working with LMG, it's Connects. So I've never written raw SQL. I never have to. Yeah, okay, so delete. Minjinder, you trigger my ADHD so easily. You just write interesting things and then off I go on a tangent. Alright, now we need to delete. I've got all these ASDFs that definitely need to just die in a fire. Okay, boom, country was deleted successfully. That's hitting our notification page. Notice I can refresh and the notification just goes away. But the big thing is we're not accidentally creating any more new records either. So if I create a new record here, see, the new country was created successfully. I'll hit refresh like 10 bajillion times. And then I'll go back to lesson 4, and we only get one record, right? Just try to refresh all. Yes, I can post the code after class, John. Oh yeah, I just caught that. John Cash, yeah. Johnny Cash. Yeah, so that's basically all I have for you tonight. So we kind of got to end a little earlier than usual. Let's talk about the lab. There is a lab. It's under the lab section. Usually I put a link here. I forgot. So here's the lab. It's updating and deleting data. make sure you download the zip file, right? Yes, I'll post the code to Blackboard. So download the code, so the starting files, and then just follow through the instructions the exact same way you did in the last one. Yeah, you know what, Stevan? I'll just publish the code to GitHub, and then I'll share the link right now, and then you guys can just go grab whatever files it is that you want. Hold on. So sometimes it's kind of annoying to try to find where your files are. If you right-click and choose Reveal in Explorer, it takes you to the directory a lot quicker. I'm going to delete that out because that's not what we're working with. Continue that one. Why not? What? Don't be ridiculous. Bye. There we go. I'll initialize this, add this, commit this. I'll create a repository for us. If you're typing in the chat, I'm ignoring it deliberately for a second, just because I want to complete this one thought before I start answering 10 million questions here. Comp 1006, lesson 04, still available, create repository. I need to add my origin. And then get push-u origin master. Copy that. And I'll add the web link in here for it. So these web links, I loaded up the other ones as well because I know some of you said that they were missing. So all the weeks currently have them in it. There you go. You can just click on this. That'll take you to here, and you can just click on the code and hit download zip. Okay. Are you posting the code? Yep, did that. Can you? Yep, did that. Are the lab one graded? No, I don't grade labs until after they're due, and they're not due till midnight tonight. So I will grade them after that point.